Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Carlton People. I have got Joe with me today. Joe, what a pleasure. Welcome to Carlton People.
Thanks, Terry. It's finally good to see you.
Yeah, we were just talking before I hit record. I did notice a bit of history behind you, that John Nichols Guernsey, which I'm sure we're going to get to. Um, and I'm sure you're going to give us plenty of stories from your experience.
Yes, I've got many, very many, from the many years I've been a supporter.
Yeah, I love it. Well, why don't we start from the beginning? How did you become a supporter? What is your Carlton story?
So I'm originally from South Australia. I had an older brother that followed Sturt, and he's now following the Crows, as most people, well, not everyone, but he jumped aboard the Crows when they started. So I sort of got my interest from listening to him talking about Sturt and Carlton. And then about probably, was it 86, I think, when Motley and Braddles and Sticks all came over from South Australia, is when I basically started following Carlton. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's that's quite the era of trades and pickups, isn't it?
Yes, it was. It was like, I suppose for the start of my journey, it was probably a great time to jump on board with the calibre of players that we got, and then what happened the following year in 1987. So yeah,
Well, that's enough to hook anybody in, that's for sure.
true. And I've been true ever since, through all the highs and all the lows.
Yeah. So what's your first memory of watching a game or going to a game? Like what do you remember at the very beginning?
So for me, I always have these significant years in my life that seem to just correspond with Carlton Football Club. So 1987 was the year I enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force, and I did my training in Adelaide and went to Victoria, and I ended up in RAF Base Williamtown, which is near Newcastle. And that was the same year that Carlton won the grand final. So I remember being interstate, New South Wales, people that followed rugby. There was a few of us that followed AFL, but yeah, watching that AFL grand final was probably one of my first memories. And I
Wow.
was just turned 18. Now I'm showing my age. 18 at the time. Yeah.
Wow. Well, what do you remember from the 87 grand final?
Um, I remember Pat Cash did the coin toss, because I just remember him being there and did the coin toss and stuff. I also, Jesus, take me back a lot. I do remember emotionally Braddles taking, after we won the cup, going over to Peter Motley, because we all know Peter Motley had his accident that year, and presenting the medal and the Premiership Cup to Mott's at the time. So that's something I do remember from back then.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah,
I like that. I haven't heard that one yet.
well, there you go.
What's what would you say are some of the core memories that you have as a supporter? You mentioned earlier there's quite a few stories. What are the ones in your experience that make up
Ooh.
your story?
Um, so 1995, again, another significant time in my life. I was in the Air Force. This time I was based at RAF Base Tyndall, which is in the Northern Territory, and I was late to my own wedding. Um, Luckily, my ex-husband now, but at the time was a Carlton supporter. So we were playing, I think it was round 7 or something. So it was May the 13th, 1995, and we were playing the Bombers, and I was very late to my own wedding. I know brides are supposed to be traditionally late, but I was very late because I was pacing backwards and forth. It was a very close game. I think we won by 8 points on the day. But yeah, that sticks in my mind as a significant Carlton moment for me.
That is a significant Carlton memory. That's that is commitment to the cause.
Yes. Um, I've also, so like we all have favourite players, and I was a big Anthony Koutafidis fan. Still am. I've named my car after him. That's how much I love him.
Wow.
I finally got to meet him, but it was in Darwin. So sort of all these places that I've been. I was in the RAF in Darwin at the time, and he came with Ange Christo to a Greek Lenti festival. So that was another thing where I got a bit like Carlton player, starstruck sort of thing, because I was finally meeting this person who I idolised as a player. And I had my daughter at the time who was 8 weeks old, and I called her Zoe. And I remember Kuda saying to me, "Oh, you know, Zoe's a Greek name. It means life, I think." And yes, and my daughter to this day, who is now 24, says, "Mum, I asked her the other day, how long have you supported Carlton?" She said, "I'm Carlton for life, Mum. I met Kuda when I was a baby. I'm Carlton for life." So yeah, that's another great part of my life with Carlton. And then 2009 in Adelaide at training, I got to meet Fev after a training. It was his last year with Carlton, and he was doing what most guys, they were all getting on the bus to get ready to leave from training. And I just sort of said, "Can I have a photo, Fev, with my older son, my daughter?" He's like, "Yep, no problems." And I've got a daughter with special needs, with a disability. She's non-verbal. And at the time she was 7, and she only just learnt to walk that year at 7 years old. And she was to the side when we got the photo, and she's carrying on, having a bit of a meltdown, pointing at the bus. And Feb's like, "What's going on? Is she all right?" And I said, "Oh, she loves buses. She just wants to get on." He's like, "Yep, no problems." He walks on over, and I just remember he like this big man and these big hands, and he like just come over to her and grabbed her little hand, and he said, like, "I'm taking her on the bus." And I'm like, "Well, I'm coming." Yep. So I got on the bus with him, and he let her like walk on the bus. And I remember walking on the bus with her, and there was Juddy and like everyone from like 2009 just sitting there waiting for the bus to go. And my daughter's just walking down the aisle, and they were like, "Hi." And he's just taken his time and letting her like have her moment. And then like the manager or someone sort of came on, and they're like, "Come on, Feb, like we've got places to go. We've got to be somewhere." And he's like, "Yep, give me a second." And I will love him to death for that. I always have. I always remember his generosity and how he was to my daughter. So, yeah.
Few things important there. Well, firstly, I mean, firstly, the memories that you instill in any young supporter, they last a lifetime, and I'm sure that one will obviously last a lifetime. And those core moments there can really make or break a child's love for a team. And then secondly, just on Fev, God, he was entertaining.
Yes, he was. I loved him. I still loved him when he went. He did all those silly things, and I still love him now. Like I still follow him in social media. I still think he's a great guy and what he's doing. So, but yeah, I'd still love to bump into him to this day and just let him see my daughter, who's now 21,
Yeah.
and just say this little girl, like what you did for her at that time of her life. Really, like for me as a mother, it was beautiful. Like, yeah, absolutely beautiful.
That's our Fev. That is our Fev. So, you mentioned you did some time in the RAF. What was that like?
I loved it. I spent nearly 12 years in the Air Force. So I didn't get to go overseas. I was supposed to get a posting, or not a posting, but like an attachment to overseas. At the time I was in Darwin, supposed to go to Timor, but my ex-husband at the time was serving. I was serving, had my son who was only, about 9 months old, and I just couldn't go. And it was unfortunate, because it's one of those things being the Defence Force where I really wanted to serve my country in an aspect overseas, but I never got to do that. But the time that I did serve, I thoroughly enjoyed. I would have stayed in for a long, long time, but unfortunately things happened, and I did my 12 years. I got to see, like I had a posting in New South Wales and a posting back in Adelaide, and then I spent 12 years in the Territory, but not all in the Air Force. I spent time in Katherine, time in Darwin, and then when my ex-husband and I got out, we actually moved to remote Alice Springs. So, yeah. We got involved in my time in Katherine. I got involved with the Katherine District's Football League. So my ex-husband he played football. He's a country Victorian boy, one of 7 boys, so of course he's going to play football.
Of course.
And then we went to Darwin, and I was lucky enough to get involved with the Waratah Football Club while we were there, and a lot of footballers there. Adrian McAdam was coach at one stage when we were there, and Gilbert McAdam used to pop in. Saw some of the Matt Morris Rioli and a few of the Riolis, and some of the younger players that have played over the past few years in other teams. I watched them as youngsters in the NTFL up in Darwin, which was pretty good.
Yeah, wow. So, of all of your time that you served, I'm curious. I've never had somebody in this series who's come from our defence force, but so all your time in that was served, what do you think you learnt the most?
It installed a lot of discipline into me. Just so the training back then for recruit training was, if you had OCD, you were fine. So everything had to be a certain way and a certain setup. But that's still installed in me to this day. I'm very like, things have to be in a certain place. I'm always on time. I don't like to be late. It's just, and a sense of pride. I still have this sense of pride about myself and life. Yeah, so, but discipline, definitely. Not like I was a rat bag or anything. Maybe some people might say I was, but yeah, definitely
right.
the things that, it made me a better person, I think. Not that I was on a bad path before, but yeah, no. Definitely was good. I even said to my children, if you want to join the Defence Force, go for it. But unfortunately, they weren't interested, so.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a Guernsey behind you with John Nichols,
Yes,
his
that
name
one.
on the back. What's the story with that? I don't think I've seen that before.
So being in the Defence Force, you come across people, Army, Navy, Air Force, and I became good friends with a guy who was in the Army who played a lot of football. And over his years, he's collected a lot of jerseys, Guernseys from teams he's played in WA all the way through to Victoria, New South Wales. And he was passing through many, many, many years ago and just out of the blue said, I've got a present for you, Joe. Here you go. And just gave it to me, gifted me this Guernsey, and I'm like, wow, like, I'll take that, thank you.
Yep. Don't blink at that.
No, it's very retro, yeah. So it's a very old woolen one. Yeah, I've turned it around, but it's in great condition. I mean, his signature's faded a little bit, but yes, it's my pride and joy. Should be hanging somewhere rather than in my cupboard, in all honesty. But
Yeah,
that's
right.
where it
There
is.
you go. Yeah. So as we move, closer to today, how have you viewed the evolution of footy, both as a sport and as something we watch as entertainment? What's your view on, or just how do you reconcile the change?
Well, this year, it's a great change. I mean, living in South Australia and predominantly Crows and Port, I've been hammered for years. I love the footy banter. I have so many great friendships through footy banter and through all of that. But all the dark times and being a Carlton supporter and, the constant jokes of, the paper bags under the bench and then like, oh, you get all these number one draft picks and you still can't win and, all that sort of banter and watching the game change and the rules that have come along with it. There's some rules that have come along and I've been like, oh, geez, but we have to move forward with the times, I suppose. We can't argue with what the AFL decide to put forward. But this year, admittedly, like halfway through the year, I said to the kids, because my kids, one lives in Sydney, one lives in Melbourne, and we always get together when the game's on and while it's playing, we'll text each other and have our 2 cents worth. And yeah, halfway through the year, I was so frustrated and angry. And for those close games, I have to admit, Terry, I turned the TV off and I would pace up and down, set the timer on my watch for how many minutes were left in the last quarter and pace. And there was one time where I had to actually go and lie down in my room because I had some issues with my heart And I was like, oh, I really just don't want to end up in hospital.
Is it worth the risk?
Oh, it was. Yeah, so, and the kids were like, well, how would you go if we went into a final? You know, if you went, Mum. I said, I really don't know. I honestly don't know if I can take the pressure. We went there last year. I went with the kids to the last game last year when we lost to Collingwood, because my son's girlfriend's a Collingwood supporter. And so she took her dad, he came along, my daughter. So there was my 3 children who were all Carlton supporters and myself. And that game was hard enough to how I felt physically and mentally. I still didn't recover, I don't think. And my poor daughter, I thought I was bad as a passionate Carlton supporter, but I remember the siren going and sitting there going like, what just happened? And I looked behind me at her and she was bawling, like sobbing. And of course, my son's girlfriend was a Collingwood supporter, got up to hug her, like out of sympathy, and I snapped at her and said, why are you hugging her? Why are you crying? We lost. Yes, that didn't go down very well.
It's the inner Carlton. I like that. Keeping the rivalry afloat.
But yes, very happy with this year, Terry, and I've got a good feeling about next year. But mind you, if you ask any of my friends, every time the season starts, I've got a good feeling about this year. I will make the top 8. Yeah, we'll make the top 8.
Well, this year, 23, that was the first year that you were right for a while. So, it can only really go one way, upwards from here.
We've got to just think positive. But what saddens me is to see the likes of Cruiser and Mark Murphy and Gibbsy and even Eddie and other players that have come through and have not had that chance. But to me, I look at it as they've been a part of the Carlton history. We still remember them for their part that they partook in this journey that we had. So, and I'm sure they're all saying as well, we helped with that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, they're definitely part of the story, particularly with this group. I think, especially those names that you mentioned. I think it goes to show so many elements that you need to get right to win. It's, the first thing is, are the players the right players? And then everything's got to be aligned with the club and the administration and the fans. I think one thing I've learned being a Carlton supporter is how difficult it really is to win.
Yes, definitely. And then even especially for the players, they forget how to win. And then as supporters, we forget how to support.
Yeah.
And that's showing a bit through what we've all obviously seen it in some of the social media of what they've shown, the bad side of Carlton supporters and how they react. But you forget to support. But I can honestly say I've still remained optimistic and positive and always supported with my full heart through all the dark days. And now that we're sort of coming out the other side and seeing the light and the sunshine, it's a great feeling. It's just awesome. And having people coming up and saying geez, how's those Blues of yours, Joe? Haven't they been so great this year? I've got so many friends that support so many different teams, and I've got friends that live all around Australia, and getting messages and texts, and it's just awesome. And that's what I love about footy. It brings everybody together in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is it about Carlton specifically that you think makes people so passionate?
I think their history, I don't know. I think their history and their loyalty, they're proud. They're a proud club, regardless of what's all been happening. They're a pretty proud club, and that rivalry, because we've all got to hate somebody. And I love that there's those big rivalries. And again, if talking about rivalries, you speak to my kids, they'll say, "Oh, why you really hate Collingwood, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they go, "You really hate the Bombers, don't you?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they go, "Mum, is there a team that you sort of like?" And I'm like, "No, except for Carlton."
Not really.
I just don't like anybody. And I've taught them you can't have second favourites. Not on. So, yeah.
I think we need to
I did not brainwash my kids to follow Carlton. My son's only a recent supporter. He started in 2016 because he wanted to be a golfer, wanted to be a professional golfer. Actually left South Australia to go to Melbourne to go to golf school. So I was never really interested in football. And it wasn't until he moved to Melbourne and he got into it, and now he proudly follows Carlton, and he works for Puma, so that's even better.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And my daughter, so there's a bit of rivalry in the family because she'll with him and say, you're already a new supporter. I followed Carlton for life. So yeah. And my daughter with special needs, because she's non-verbal, she has autism and intellectual disability. She goes Blues, but I've taken her to games over here, and she cheers if the opposition team kicks a goal. So she's everyone's supporter. And there's a lot of people within the Carlton community that have come over here and from the cheer squad. And even when we've gone to Melbourne, that have met her. And that's what I've said. That's the other thing I love about Carlton. They are the biggest, best bunch of inclusive people I've ever met. We've gone to games there. She's like cried and been overwhelmed, and they've comforted her, and they've brought her down to the fence line and said, like, let her meet the players when we've had a win. And over here, they've accepted her in the cheer squad and everywhere else. And we've gone to functions here, and people are trying to talk, and she's like, she really yells. Like, she's like, woo! And no one bothers, and she claps, and it causes everybody else to clap. So yeah, this year she got to meet the CEO and president as well, and they were so nice with her. So yeah, couldn't ask for a better club.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's we have a very special cheer squad, no doubt about that. I think the work that they've done over the last, forever, but from when I've come into contact with them and understood the work that they do, just to make sure everyone feels welcome and make sure everyone has a safe space to be at the football, I think is part of the essence of the club and sport as well.
For sure. Yep. I totally agree.
Yeah. So with the group, I've got one more question for you before I let you go. Which year do you think they will next lift up the cup?
I'd like to say next year,
Mm-hmm.
but I've had a look at I suppose there's still some drafts, to come, but I'd like to think next year, but I possibly think it'll be the following year, so 2025. That's
I'm with
my
you on
feeling.
that.
I'm feeling that we'll go pretty well next year, but we maybe not just get there again.
Yep. I think we have just entered the window, and we might. Premierships are very hard to win, let alone making finals.
Yes.
So I think once we're there for a little while, get a little bit more of a taste, a bit more experience in those big games at the pointy end of the year, then we'll be ready to go.
For sure. Yep. That's what I think as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me and documenting your story. I've really enjoyed hearing it and absorbing it, and can't wait to speak to you next time.
Sorry, I've gone on a bit of a tangent in some areas. I go a bit off topic sometimes, but all these memories of Carlton, and there's so many more. It's just too many. But it's been a pleasure, Terry. I actually enjoy watching you. I'm a long time watcher and probably not as much as jump in and say a lot. But yes, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Go Blues.
And go Blues. Woo!
Yeah, absolutely.